and that was a fabulous evening. Just a quick show of hands, how many of you were there? Wow, so kind of about 50-50. So I guess there's a lot of people wanting to know more. We have no PA that's linked to our voices. There's going to be speakers to show the film. So if anybody needs to move a little bit closer to hear what's being said, then please do so now. The other issue that I need to make you aware of is that these proceedings will be filmed. And if that is something that does not fit with your plans for this evening, then the row, I'm told that the rows at the back will be out of shot. So only the tops of your head will probably be known. So if you don't wish for your questions to be filmed, then please also consider that. A couple of things, little housekeeping things. The fire exits, I think, are clearly marked, but normally people go out the way they came in. There is no fire drill planned for this evening, so if the fire bell sounds, it's out. The loos, I think most of you may know, they're out the way through these doors here, and immediately to the right there's a corridor, and on the right-hand side there are a couple of individual toilets there. Tonight will be approximately 45 minutes of presentation. There will be a 15-minute question and answer session where I will be the person that hopefully will give everybody a chance to speak. And then there is some homework. I think it will all be done here around the tables, hence the pens and the papers. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our host for this evening, Sally.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming. So I'm just going to start with a really quick recap on who we are at Onion and also on how we got to this point with this project. Because we worked very closely with the community panel and they gave us some feedback from the last meeting, which was that the process wasn't clear enough. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to provide some clarity on that this evening. But before that, I'd like to begin by thanking those who have contributed to debate on Facebook over the past few weeks. So we haven't got very involved in those conversations, but we have taken away the key questions that have been raised there, and we hope that we hope to respond to them all tonight in amongst our presentations. But anything that you feel hasn't been answered, you can still obviously ask at the end in the Q&A time. I'd also like to just say that, of course, there are no certainties here. So as you'll hear through this presentation, this is a really ambitious project and we're working incredibly hard to deliver it. But we can't possibly guarantee what success will look like at this stage. So we'll do our best to achieve the targets we've set and to be responsive to the needs of the community, and we are taking the risks to make this happen. So I ask that you please do make criticism constructive. We welcome ideas, comments, and debate. I also want to be clear that we don't seek to monopolise the industrial space at the paper mill site. If others have ideas they want to try and deliver, we would absolutely encourage them to do so. So, Onion. We're a team of 8 women. I'll just actually kind of point this all out. So we have 5 directors. So there's Jess Pendergrass, who isn't able to be here tonight, and there's Rachel Kelly, Naomi Griffith, Georgie Grant. Where's Georgie?
She's out there.
Oh, Georgie's outside. And myself. We have an amazing office manager, Kiri Carter. A visitor centre manager, Fiona Payne, who also isn't able to be here this evening, she's running the choir. And an amazing education officer, Pat Smith. So we're all from this town or very nearby, and many of us grew up here, or again, nearby. We have also lived and worked elsewhere, and each of us brings a unique skill set and experience to the table, all contributing to a team that is able to deliver ambitious and high-level projects, all with the intention of giving Watchet a stronger future in what is now an incredibly challenging context. So I'm sure everyone here will agree that Watchet is an incredibly special town. The scenery, the people, the strength of community, the sense of fun, the amount we managed to deliver for ourselves here, from like football to Sea Scouts to festivals and the Phoenix, this town delivers an extraordinary amount at an extraordinary level. And all these things about Watchet make it hard to believe that we also have some fairly difficult problems to solve. The economy here is very challenging. As one of the community panel very wisely put, most of the profit-making businesses have abandoned Watchet in recent years. It's too hard for them. Watchet is a remote seaside town. Private money struggles to reach here. So as local authority funding has been cut over the past decade, we've had to find new ways to plug that gap and create money and jobs. And this is what we're trying to achieve at Onion, and especially with this project. So the thinking for this project began when the paper mill closed in 2015, and with the sense of devastation that this created. The continued grief felt here, combined with the fear for our own children and what they might be able to achieve in Watchet, spurred us into action. We decided that we could not allow Watchet to become another seaside town solely reliant on the tourist economy with its limited seasonal and typically low-paid jobs. Industry is what set Watchet apart from many similar coastal towns. It's what gave young people here the opportunity to make something of themselves, and we refuse to sit back and watch this slip away from us. So, over the course of around 18 months, we carried out a piece of research that looked at what a new time and place appropriate industry could be. It's clear that 200 years ago it was the docks and the river, and then following that the train that brought and developed the mill and other industries in Watchet. But both the world and Watchet's assets have changed considerably in that time. So we needed to understand what assets could support an industry and now, what could work in this place at this point in time and into the future, provide a high level of employment and respond appropriately to the level of climate emergency we find ourselves in. So this process began with a set of aims we were working towards, and many of you will have seen these before. See, these are the 5 Ps we're aiming to deliver on, and the aims we would mark an industry shortlist against at the end of this research process. So yes, we're looking to transform the local economy, generating at least 175 future-proof jobs, create a pioneering mission-led business with national and potentially global significance. We wanted it to be purposeful, to make the community proud of its strength and purpose, to create a profit, to retain locally, to reinvest in future development, and we wanted to do all of this in a socially, environmentally and ethically outstanding way. Yes, that's what we were aiming to do. And we're still aiming to do. These remain our aims. So, from there began an awful lot of desk research, scouring through industrial and economic strategies at European, national, district and town levels. We looked through and learned from as much of the thinking processes others have been through as possible. We looked at what industries were doing well, which were in decline. We thought about the assets of this place and tried to align them. We spoke to lots of people at conferences and at meetings, including academics, local stakeholders, including the community, industrial professionals, think tanks, and we used these conversations to refine the thinking further. So many people here made a lot of wonderful suggestions, but some, like the very popular idea of a leisure centre, simply weren't viable options for us to take forward, because they would struggle to be commercially viable in this place. So they simply didn't correspond to the aims of the project. So just to clarify that. So it was at the end of this process that we weighed up all the options and contributions to thinking. We felt that bio-based material development represented the most promise in relation to our aims. I think this presentation's got muddled up. Anyway, some nice pictures of the mill. Then and now.
I'm glad you didn't ask me to press the buttons.
So it was also during this process that we met Biohm and decided that if we combined our visions, so theirs for a healthy and sustainable built environment and ours for social justice, that we could do something extraordinary. And this is why we chose to pursue the work together. So now, in essence, we are building an industry together here in Watchet that will take local organic byproducts and, by feeding this to mushrooms, grow products for the construction industry. In the first instance, we will be growing insulation panels. Ehab will shortly talk you through this process in more detail with more information on the final product than we were able to share last time, and he will also discuss the exciting research they've been carrying out into plastics and mushrooms eating plastics, and how this might soon form part of our processes here in Watchet. But before I do hand over, oh, that slide must be at the end. Sorry, it was a slide of you guys, but anyway, you can see these guys here. I just wanted to talk about the community panel. So I'd just like to say that so at the end of the talks, we'll be closing with some input from the community panel tonight. So this is the community panel here, wonderful people. And I just wanted to say a personal and public thank you to the panel for their support over the last 6 months. Each member of the panel has brought something different and incredibly helpful to the table. From electrical expertise, scientific rigour, security, education, workers' rights, community connections, even, amazingly, bioscience. But most importantly, they've brought passion and support. And they bring with them a wider conscience and communications. It isn't easy to deliver a project like this, but they make it so much more possible, and I am so grateful to them. Thank you.
Hello everyone, it's so good to see some familiar faces as well as some new faces. So Biohm is a research and development-led company. We put nature as the sole inspiration of everything that we do. So we take our inspiration from natural processes, biological processes and systems, and use that to solve the problems that we're facing today. We are a private limited company, but we were only set up as a private limited company because of the trajectory ahead of us as an IP-rich tech company in a sense. We always wanted to be set up as a CIC and a social enterprise in a legal form, but we were very much advised against that because it would simply put us at a disadvantage if we try and grow rapidly as our trajectory or as our plans assume that we will. So we are a private limited company. We reinvest all of our profits into the company at the moment. Within the next 5 years, we may start giving dividends to shareholders, but that will be limited to about 15% at the most. And just to put things into perspective, I think Saj will cover this a little bit more. Most social enterprises invest at least 30% into their shareholders. So we're being very militant and very intentional about the way that we are carrying out business. We are looking to introduce bio-based materials, construction systems, and a range of services into the construction industry that will revolutionize the way the industry currently operates and the way that we do business. We are starting with our bio-based materials, eventually going into construction systems, and our services is something that we offer at the moment as well. We have an incredible team supporting us. Some of them are here today. We've got Oksana Bondar, who's our Deputy Director of Innovation. We've got Samantha Jenkins, who's our Lead Biotechnology Engineer. We've got Harry Darkley, who's our Director of Operations. And we've also got an incredible team that couldn't be with us here today from a variety of backgrounds, from director level globally at private sector companies, as well as scientists and engineers and designers, all of whom have an incredible passion to really change the world and make a difference. And it's with such an interdisciplinary team with a variety of expertise and knowledge that we are able to ensure that all of our solutions are very well considered, cohesive, and take into account every possible stakeholder. Starting with our materials, just to give you a quick recap again on what we mentioned in the last meeting. We take byproducts, not waste as you know it from industry. So things like grass trimmings, things like coffee chaff, which is a waste stream from the coffee roasted industry. It's a shell around the coffee bean. Things like sugarcane, things like agricultural waste, dried agricultural waste, stuff like ash dieback, So ash that has been affected by ash dieback, we can take that wood and use it in our process, as well as remediate any of the potential things that are in the material. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We're starting with only organic waste streams and then moving into the plastic side of things a little bit later. So plastic is very much at a research stage now, looking at being implemented in our current process eventually. And organic waste is the only organic byproduct is what we're going to be using to start with. When the byproduct comes to the site, it's immediately processed, which means that it's completely dried. So it's stored and sealed immediately in a safe way. And we can use our byproducts to create a variety of our materials. One of our materials that we create is called orb, which is a sheet material made out of food or agricultural waste. This is not something we're going to be manufacturing here in Watchet in the facility, or it's not planned at the moment anyway, but it's something we're still developing. And we're developing a range of materials that take waste streams from a variety of industries that are seen as excess byproduct and turn them into useful commodities like materials that can help regenerate communities as well as have an incredible impact on the environment. Mycelium is what we're all here to hear about. Mycelium is the root structure of mushrooms. What we know of as a mushroom is usually the mushrooms that we know are the fruiting body of the mycelium. I'll carry on, Harry, can you please just...
Technical help.
Just as the visuals are really important as well. So the mushroom that we know is the fruiting body. It's what's usually over the ground. Under the ground, you've got the root system of the mushroom, which is known as mycelium. The root system, if grown in a confined space.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So you can see that's the root system of a mushroom. It's usually underground. If you grow that in a confined space, it grows really dense and it creates a complex network that offers incredible insulation properties. And that is the main reason why we're targeting building insulation as the first product or the sort of flagship product for our materials. When looking at the insulation properties of mycelium compared to other alternatives on the market, we've outperformed almost everything on the market. We've got a conductivity value of 0.024, probably doesn't mean anything to most people here, but when you think of insulation that is seen as a premium product on the market, offering insulation values of 0.4, we're already almost at double that. So it just puts things into perspective and shows why there's such a need for our mycelium products in the market. This is a very simplified version of the process. We wanted to just make it very clear what the process is of creating mycelium products. So you will start, these are supposed to be videos, sorry.
Thank you. I can't. Go on. Sort it out.
So the process is very simple. You're taking agricultural waste that's been dried up, you're introducing mycelium, which is You're introducing mycelium, which is here introduced in the form of mycelium, which has been introduced to a substrate that it can start consuming. And then you break that up in a bigger mold. You then fill that substrate in an existing mold, which will be used for the product. Once that mold is completely grown with mycelium, you kill the mycelium by curing it or heating it, and then you're left with a panel. The process is very similar to baking in a way. You can think of it as basically preparing a mold and letting the mycelium grow and act as a binder, putting all the substrate together. Once it's bounded enough, you kill it and you're left with that foam material. think it's going to be all videos from this point onwards, so if you can just minimize it and I can play it off the presentation. And just have the PowerPoint there. Biohm has developed a lot of knowledge and expertise in the way that we are able to evolve our strains. And that means we're able to find strains and marry them with byproducts or waste streams that are available in abundance in a particular geographical location. And that is something that we have developed a lot of intellectual property in, so we're developing a lot of our own strains, and that makes us able to compete on lots of different things like speed of production, like speed of production, as well as the waste streams that it's capable of consuming. And one absolutely fascinating thing about mycelium is its ability to microremediate. Not only does it bind the waste together, and when I say consumes it, what it actually does is it releases proteins or enzymes and trains them to break down a new food source. So when mycelium is presented with a food source, it analyzes what it needs to do with it, creates enzymes or proteins that allow it to unlock the carbon and access that nutrition. It's a very natural process that mycelium has been learning to do for billions of years, depending on what resources are available to it in the natural environment. So we are simply replicating that process in a lab and exposing the mycelium to particular environmental stresses that allow it to then basically adapt and create adaptations that are desirable. So it's a completely natural process that creates exactly the same strains that we have in the wild, and if they are ever to be introduced in the wild again, they will simply go back to the easiest carbon source available to them, which is likely to be degrading leaves or so on. Technology. Just go. Right. Perfect. Okay. I think we're there. Ooh, amazing. Some science. So this looks a lot more complicated than it really is. Basically what it's showing is that this is a plastic. It's a complicated form of carbon, and then the mycelium breaks it down into simpler forms of carbon, which are then stored into the material or released in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. The process is incredibly low impact in terms of any side effects or environmental impact, but it proposes one of the most impactful solutions for the idea of biorecycling, where we're using our mycelium strains, training them to consume really complex and difficult to recycle waste streams, things like plastics, for example, and we have had some success last year. This is what the top of a jar of mycelium looks like. So if I go back quickly to this slide. So this is a jar of mycelium. We usually put a hole at the top and stuff a sponge inside to allow it to breathe, but without having a complete seal on it. Last year in the lab, one of our strains decided to grow through the sponge and completely covered the sponge. We cut the strain open and found no remnants of the plastic sponge that was there. That was our first sign that we may have a strain that is able to consume mycelium. So also we have heard that there may have been concerns about, has the strain escaped the lab or has it gone? It hasn't left the incubation space, it's literally just grown out of the jar and consumed the plastic sponge. And this is something that we were very excited about. We spoke to the Onions about it and looked at an available call from Waitrose and decided to apply for the Plant Plastic Prize, which we won. We then got funding to develop the research further. We decided to really test out all of our strains, understand where the successes may be, and we realized that we've got 3 potential candidates from the same species that were able to consume plastic. We then did further testing and looked at all of the other strains that we may be using and the ones that have shown in past research and past literature that they may have some successful traits. And we've carried out the process further. If you look under the microscope, you can see the mycelium working its way towards the sponge. And we have found 5 successful strains that can consume polyurethane and polyethylene. Polyethylene are things like your kettle, your toaster, things that are casings, and polyurethane, things like sponges, and some softer plastics as well as harder plastics, harder versions. This is showing a piece of mycelium suspended in a liquid solution with nothing but plastic. If the mycelium wasn't able to consume the plastic, it would have not continued to live. So that was a great experiment that showed us that our mycelium strains can consume plastic alone, and they don't need another nutritional source, which was absolutely amazing result for us such early on in the research. And we're also able to carry the pattern data on the rate of degradation, so how quickly they actually consume the plastic, and we're able to improve that further. The process by which we're developing these strains is very simple. We put the strain in the plastic in a container. Once we find a successful strain, we simply clone it and put it into the next container, and we keep doing that until we get a stronger and more powerful strain. It's a very simple process. You do it with plants and horticulture, and it's something that you can apply to almost any organism. So further testing and experimentations are the next steps, as well as material prototypes and commercialization for the plastic-consuming mycelium. The idea for us is that as we are looking at hugely damaging industries like food, fashion, recycling industry, and construction industry, we're identifying the waste streams or the plastics that are difficult to consume, and then fitting them right into our manufacturing process, and then optimizing it all and introducing it as a commercial product. That is how we work.
That's the slide.
So that's the community panel.
And these are the people in the community panel.
Yes.
Many of whom are here tonight.
We visited the site today as well, and I think it was really exciting to see the progress that has been taking place now. I'm going to hand it over to Staj to give you a bit of a breakdown of all the updates regarding that site, as well as talk a little bit about what social enterprise is, what a private limited company is, and so on.
Thank you. Hi. So, you know, officially I'm called Naomi. Hi, I'm Naomi, or Spad. Oh, I'm sure we'll know me as Spad already. So yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of structure and governance, because these are some of the questions that have been coming up, you know, either via Facebook or directly to us. We are working actually at the moment with a governance expert, so as we kind of develop our process from here on in, figure out what our partnership looks like, we brought in an expert, a guy called Bob Tust, to help us look at what that right partnership is, think about all of the different things that need to factor into that, so the IP, the profit share, how we involve the community, all of those different things. He's really experienced, has great knowledge in this sector, so we're really excited to get to work with him, and he brings that kind of wealth of knowledge into it. There's a lot to think about, I guess. This is a really new and different project that we're undertaking, not only in the type of work we're doing, but also the way that we want to structure our company. So we want to make sure we get the best advice, hence we're bringing him in. We'd really hoped that he could be here tonight. We wanted him to come and talk to you a bit about governance and his experience of that. Unfortunately, he's got some childcare issues, so it falls to me. So I want to try and explain a little bit. I'll apologise in advance if I'm teaching you something that you know already, but just to kind of break down the different types of structure. But we will ask him hopefully to come again in the future and be part of a session with you so that you can interrogate that a bit more. So I guess there are lots of different types of, you know, many different types of structure, but the ones that are most relevant to us, I think, are the kind of traditional business model. And that comes in all shapes and sizes, from family businesses, which is probably what we know most in Watchet, to huge multinationals. And the main thing about traditional business is that they're using their profits and giving those profits to their shareholders. So again, in a small business, that's likely to be the business owner or someone that might have invested or lent some money to the business. In larger corporations, that's to their kind of formal shareholdings, which may be individuals or other organisations. People often also ask us if we're a charity or why we're not a charity. And a charity tends to have more of a kind of charitable aim that has to be very clearly defined. So that might be working towards solving a social or environmental problem. So those things that we believe in and hold dear to. And sometimes they're partly business. So charity shops obviously are kind of part of the business structure of a charity, or making cards to sell. But most of their money is coming from donations or other forms of fundraising. And all of the money that they earn or make is put towards their charitable aims. So social enterprises, which is where the bracket that we sit in, is a much newer kind of type of business. Actually, we think it's much more aligned to kind of the traditional family business. But what it's all about, I guess, is that most people care not just about making profit, but about a bigger picture. And social enterprise allows you to think about that. So the model legally ensures that any profits that are made from the company are reinvested. So we at Onion Collective are a social enterprise. We care not particularly about profit, but about changing things, making the community better and stronger. I guess it's what it does what it says on the tin. It's an enterprise, but for social benefit. So we're using kind of, unlike a charity, our business model, our enterprising way of working to make income. And there are lots of different types of social enterprise. At Onion Collective, we decided to be a community interest company. And again, there are different types of community interest company, just to make it more complicated. And as I think Ehab alluded to earlier, some of those do have shareholdings, and they do have dividends, and they do allow up to 35% currently of any profits made by the community interest company to be distributed to shareholders or investors. That's not the type of community interest company we are. So we're a community interest company limited by guarantee. That means there are no dividends or profits that go to shareholders or to directors. Any profits that we make from the company get reinvested into our projects. So in our case, in Watchet right now, what that looks like is profits that we might make would be reinvested, for example, into the visitor centre, so that we can make sure we extend the opening hours as far as possible and do as much as we can to support tourism in Watchet. As Ehab said, Biohm are also a social enterprise in terms of what they're trying to do. They're all about social, economic and environmental justice. I think, as Ehab explained already, they had wanted to be a CIC, but their model is slightly different. And it does get complicated because there's all these different types of model of social enterprise. So they're a limited company, but they are paying a small part of their profits in dividends or back to investors, but capped at 15%. So through this project, through Initiative Watchet, through our joint partnership organisation, we want to continue to do those cross subsidies that we do now. So continue to invest in the visitor centre, maybe in East Quay in the first few years. But what we really want to do is look at how can we stretch that further? How can we subsidise and invest further in more projects in Watchet? So I think that's not so much for you about what that structure looks like. So we're exploring all sorts of things like wealth funds and community shares, and different kind of complex legal things that we're looking at really closely and carefully, and actually that's part of what Bob will be helping us with, kind of examining the detail of that. But most importantly, I think it's about what the ideas are. So what do we do with that money? How can we use the money to get the most social benefits for this town, for Watchet and for the community? How can we help to make that work better by growing our social enterprise? And I think we've had loads of really exciting ideas around this already. The community panel have fed in a huge amount, and I think we're going to talk a bit more about that as well. So it might be things like, how do we invest in young people getting better jobs? How do we invest in their training? How do we support new businesses that might be starting in Watchet to help to build the economy? How do we invest in education? All of those things cost money, and they're all things that we might be able to do from some of the profits from this. So in the table discussions that we're going to make you all get involved in later, so there's not one which is particularly about that, because I think they factor into all of them. So a conversation around education might be, how can we use some of the money from this or some of the structure to invest in education? When we're talking about being a good employer, it's maybe actually saying, well, let's make less profits so that we can make sure that we have really brilliant training for our staff, that we can make sure that they've got a progression journey, or that we can invest in childcare if that's what's needed for them. So we want to be really, really open-minded about those ideas and think about what works. So please do feed in as much as you can to that. As I said, it's not a simple process. We're trying to be really clever and intelligent about this and take lots of ideas and then work through and figure out what works best here in Watchet. And I think that that will change over time. You know, maybe we'll fix all of the kind of educational inequalities that we have around here, and then we can move on to something else. So it's not a fixed thing, it's something that will move and grow. I just also wanted to say a little bit about funding. Again, we've had questions about this. Where do we get our funding from? What does that kind of pay for? So as a community interest company, we can apply for all sorts of different types of funding. So that might be funding to build buildings. So the £6 million that we've secured recently to build on the East Quay, which has just started. But it might also be revenue funding, so funding towards staffing or equipment or overheads for a project like a community project like Community Makers that we ran a couple of years ago, or for the kind of startup funding actually for Industry Watchet, which came from the Ford Trust for the research phase. So as Sally said, in a place like Watchet, would be great, wouldn't it, if it all worked perfectly well and we didn't need that funding, but we do, to work on a level playing field, to get the investment that we need in our town, we need that extra funding. So in another place, in Bristol, a set of studios and a gallery would probably work perfectly well as a kind of private enterprise, but that doesn't work in the same way here necessarily. But we still want and need all of those things in Watchet. So, you know, we seek funding to enable those things to get kick-started. Similarly, as do, you know, private companies get injections of cash, maybe in the form of investment, or in fact even grants from the government to support jobs. But I guess for us, it's about using that money and that funding that we get and thinking about what the positive community benefit of it is at the end. We at Onion also earn quite a lot of money through consultancy work that we do, so we have a kind of really wide range of experience, and we go out all around the country and work mainly with other community organisations or charities or councils to help and support them in the kind of work that they want to do. So at the moment we're working with a community organisation in Liverpool to advise them on setting up a cafe. We also do kind of funding advice for an environmental charity in Devon. We're just doing a big piece of community engagement work with a council. So we do all sorts of work that we go out and about around the country. Actually, it's great for us because we get inspired and meet lots of new wonderful people who are doing similar things to us. Okay, I hope that's cleared up any of that. Obviously, if you've got more questions about it, we're really happy to answer them. But I wanted to then just update a bit on the build. So this is the site today. As you probably know, what we're doing is building this facility within an existing building on the paper mill site. So there's just very few buildings remaining there, and we're using one of them under a meanwhile use for about 3 or 4 years to build this kind of demonstration facility. So we're building a wooden temporary-ish structure. So it can be, it can be reused. We're working with a local construction firm, who I'm sure lots of you know, Walsh & Sons. So they're building it for us and working obviously with local plumbers and electricians and all of the other services that we need. So it's actually a really quick build. It's only 10 weeks because it's going up in these lovely panels. So we've begun, and the aim is that it should be ready by kind of mid to the end of March. At that point we bring all of the amazing techie kit in. So all sorts of different pieces of machinery that will come into the facility and around it. And we hope that production will start in around April. So I think back to you, Ihab, to talk a bit more about that, how it will
work. Right, thank you, Spaj. I think one thing I really want to share is that we're trying to do something that is quite revolutionary here, and it is the first time that something of this kind, in exactly this way, is happening. So there are a lot of things that we are having to find appropriate experts to advise us on, and there are a lot of things that we have to just do what's best in terms of our knowledge and the research that's around there. That means that we are constantly going to be improving and constantly going to be developing. We are a young company, we're learning as we develop and as we grow, but one thing that we are incredibly non-apologetic about is our scientific rigor. And that is because we've got PhDs that have been in the industry for over 20 years working at NASA and top research institutes that ensure that we take the appropriate scientific rigor when we do what we do. And that ensures that we take into account any potential impact that comes out of any process that we take place throughout the way that we work. And we're not required to do all these things. If we just wanted to manufacture, we'd go and produce and sell the product, but we just are not going to let ourselves do that, because we want to make sure that what we're delivering has been tested, has been accredited against industry standards, and we've already started that process, I think, about 4 months ago. So we're in the process of getting accreditation. Nothing that could potentially cause any harm or any sort of negative impact throughout the life of the product will be allowed for us to go through the accreditation. So everything will be tested in advance to make sure that what we're delivering is what we claim it to be. We have done a lot of in-house testing to offer further reassurance to ensure that we are almost certain that we're going to pass all of the tests. So there's a lot of promise around that area. But things take time to develop, and things take time to get to their best possible version. And one thing that I would like to ask you all is, although we are trying to do something that is really revolutionary and amazing, it is something that we need your support and help with, because it's something that we're doing for the first time. Community work is not easy, community work is complicated, but it is so rewarding, and that's exactly why we're doing it. We want to show that you can create products and benefit an industry, meet all the performance requirements without necessarily harming the environment or have a negative social impact embedded in the business model. And that is something that is so ingrained in current capitalistic models that we are trying really hard to make sure that we are still able to operate within this industry whilst removing all of the inequalities. And eventually we'll not just have one facility, but we'll have 1 million facilities around the world doing such amazing work. So I just wanted to say that just to help manage some of the expectations. And to help set the record straight, I'm here with all of the facts very clearly displayed, so that if there are any questions or any concerns, we're more than happy to discuss that further, and here you will see exactly what we have planned at exactly what time. So around April to June in this year, 2020, we're looking to set up our first iteration of the facility, which will produce 1,500 square meters per month, which does around 10 homes worth of insulation. At that capacity, again, we're at April, June time, 2020, we're looking to hire around 3 to 5 production jobs, around 1 to 2 biologists or scientists, and 2 to 4 managerial jobs. At that same capacity, this year, between April and June 2020, we are looking to be able to take in 13 tons of waste or byproduct from the industry per month, which is only around 2 shipping containers. So any concerns around logistics are hopefully alleviated by that. Those 2 shipping containers can come in 2 shipments throughout the month, so that's only 2 journeys a month as a starting point. When it comes to the actual environmental impact, aside from everything that the product can do, one thing that we didn't really talk enough about is its ability, the facility's ability to consume carbon and act as a carbon sink for the local geography. The mycelium, as it breaks down these materials, it stores the carbon in itself, as well as producing carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide we funnel through a greenhouse on the facility and turn it back into oxygen, and the greenhouse itself will be growing things like bamboo or high things that consume a lot of carbon, and that's also something that we'd love your input on: what can be in that greenhouse, what can we use it for, and how can we have more community involvement around that. So per month, the facility is estimated to consume around 2.6 tons of carbon. That's the same as what 1,600 trees would need to consume that amount in a month. So obviously that's not the impact of 1,600 trees, because trees do a lot of other good things for the environment, but when it comes to sequestering carbon, that just shows you or gives you an idea of our facility's capability to take carbon dioxide, to take carbon from the earth. And then our second iteration, which is around July to December time, so we're still in this year. By the end of this year, we're looking at having 3,000 square meters of mycelium insulation being produced every month, and 20 homes worth of insulation. That will correlate with 6 to 10 production roles and 2 to 3 biologist roles and 2 to 4 managerial roles. These roles are a total, so it's not those in addition to the ones I mentioned earlier. This will be the total capacity for the people working in the facility. When it comes to the waste intake or the byproduct intake, we're looking at 26 tons per month now and 4 shipping containers. So that's from July to December this year. And then again, carbon consumption, 5 tons of carbon per month. It would take 3,200 Ts to sequester that amount per month. And then our future target, or what we really need to work towards as quickly as possible, but we're aiming for that to be from 2021 onwards. We're looking at 18,000 square meters being produced per month, which translates into 120 homes per month. And when it comes to jobs, that goes up to 40 or more production roles, 6 or more biologist roles, and 6 or more managerial roles. At this scale, we're going to be consuming 156 tons of waste or byproduct every month. So that's around 24 shipping containers worth. At that time, 2022 or so on, we're going to make sure that we're able to work this out in a way that logistically works within the town's capacity and available resources. And of course, when it comes to the carbon sequestration, we're looking at around 30 tons, which is around 19,200 trees in terms of the impact. So you can see here that there's an incredible environmental impact as well as ingrained social impact within the facility's production. Because we're using living organisms to create most of our products, very minimal human intervention, we're able to create a facility that is able to scale quite rapidly whilst reinvesting into the local community as well. The reason why we need to scale so rapidly is because we are currently absolutely overwhelmed with the industry's demand for our product. We've been invited to various countries to set up our next facilities there. We're looking to set up a second one with the YMCA in Newcastle. And so we need to scale up absolutely rapidly in order to cope with the scale of the industry's demand and the needs. And we're doing this in a very measured way. Again, we've got about 21 advisors that are known as top experts from around the world that are helping us manage that scale up in a way that ensures that this facility will continue to scale up slowly and stay that way for the long term. Right. I think that's the end of my part.
I think it's the community panel's turn. I hope you've not been all brain boxed too much. I feel as though you've been absorbing so much energy here tonight. You will have your opportunity to ask questions later, but I believe you'd like to say something.
Well, first of all, we were each going to say how we joined the panel, because we're a very random collection, and we all joined for different reasons. Though mostly around the same point, although we've added people as they've shown an interest. So we were asked each to say, first of all, why we joined the panel very quickly. And I'll tell you the reason I joined the panel. My name is Liz McGrath. I joined the panel because I saw an advert in the paper or on social media, I'm not sure which, inviting people to join the panel. And there were 3 reasons why I wanted to help the project. One is because it looked as though it would bring jobs to Watchet, and that seems to me very important. The paper mill disappeared just as I came to live in Watchet, or within a year or 2. I thought the product sounded amazing, and it's the sort of thing we should be thinking about. And I thought, as a past educationalist, that the opportunity for us to learn in Watchet and across the world from this was just fantastic. So I wanted to help.
I think that the people on the panel are very diverse, many different backgrounds. We've enjoyed talking about what we'd like to do and bringing our ideas together. We've spoken about the fears and the worries from the community, and looked at the best ways of sort of negating the negative impact there. Okay. Oh, right. Sorry. Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm John Irvin, and I offered my contribution to the panel in a personal capacity, primarily because my family and I have known and loved Watchet for something like 50 years now, and I wanted to help explore and develop this exciting comment, really for the future benefit of Watchet. And I did it because my career background is in science, technology and innovation, especially using evidence-based decision-making and a peer review process for informing constructive debate and sometimes constructive criticism. As Ehab said, it's the basis of the whole scientific method, but also to provide a bit of advice and moral support at times. Particularly, you tend in innovation and change to get a lot of naysayers who repeatedly say, this will never work, and all the reasons why. And for example, I always remember some of the sayings of Mahatma Gandhi, who was one of the key movers of change in the social area, where he used to say, first of all they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then in a gentle way you shake the world, and then you win. That's my job.
So hello everybody, I'm a bit of a foreigner because I live in Stigumber, but in a previous reincarnation I was a microbiologist I was working in soil when everybody in Aberdeen was working in oil, and then I was working on rotting onions when everybody was doing much more interesting things, but this really was the most exciting project for me. I'm passionate about the environment and conservation and waste and recycling, and also about the possibility of the circular economy feeding back into social enterprise. So it ticked a lot of boxes for me.
I'll go stand up. I'm Joel Quakes. I moved down here about 3 years ago. The reason I moved down here is because my wife was born in Wiveliscombe, so I brought her back. It only took me 37 years. So. I've been, or was, a trade union official for 35 years in Moor Mount, and I despaired when I saw the way that work turning, particularly in places like Watchet, that your work or employment's being replaced with seasonal, 0 hours, low wages, and particularly since the paper mill's shut. And that's why I joined the panel, try and get some good jobs back into Watchet, good apprenticeships and good education for the young. Stop them leaving like my missus did.
I'm Sarah Summers. Most of you probably know me as the War Memorial Lady. I'm an archivist by sort of trade. I came across the panel because I was invited to join actually, but because I've got a fondness for the community of Watchet, I felt it was important that somebody pretty ordinary was on the panel. The panel is a mixture of people from all backgrounds, and we find it quite amazing what these guys are going to produce. It's just an honour for it to be in Watchet. If people could only see what the effort these guys are putting into it, it probably would blow your mind like it does ours. And we're happy to represent you or have you aboard if you want to come and join us. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Frank. I joined the panel because I'm a bit concerned about the future of Watchet. I've got 2 sort of early 20s kids, and there's no work, is there? I mean, they are in work, but there's not very much opportunity. I was reading Free Press on Friday, and they were talking about Van Heusen. They left it 37 years ago, and they're still making shirts, but not here. They're still making paper, but not here. They're still printing packaging, not here. Ships are still going into harbours, and lorries are still, going around the country with product, but not here. Apparently we got the worst social mobility in the country. So when the news media comes to talk about social media, despite the fact that we're #1, they don't come here. So I feel that we're kind of lost in a sense. I always view sort of West Somerset in general as like a landlocked island, because the road network ain't very good. 50% of our catchment area is water. The Free Press was printed in Willerton. It's no longer, not for over 20 years now. So when these lot start talking about jobs, no, I think it's brilliant.
So far on the panel, we've talked about sources of bio-waste, products which we could make out of the product. I presume that will be passed around later, will it? Okay, so it's like cork or chamois-like material. Best employment practice. Some of our members include trade unionists, I've spoke to already, and how to involve the community. How this factory might be the stimulus and learning, and a training centre in Watchet as well. Starting with the apprenticeships, which will offer amazing chances for Watchet teenagers. In summary, how we get the most of the social benefit out of this three-way partnership between the social enterprise of Biohm, the community interest company Onion Collective, and the community of Watchet.
So in conclusion, we'd like to say we think it's a real privilege to be on this panel. It's been so exciting and interesting every time we've met. And we have come up with some ideas that have been accepted, which we think is fantastic. And most of all, we think Watchet is so lucky to have this. There are deprived towns all over this country who would give their right arm for a development that we're going to have in a little corner of our town. And it might be little, but I think it's going to have a huge impact.
Just really quickly to say, there are 4 other members of the community panel who aren't here tonight, but just to let you know who they are in case you do want to communicate with the panel. It's Chris Northam, Martin Stevens, Oliver Harvey, and Steve Bobby. You know any of those guys? Yeah, thank you.
Wow. It's your turn, guys. If I could just remind you that we have scheduled, and I'm governed by the timekeepers behind me, 15 short minutes for questions and answers. And I will best direct whichever question you propose to those best prepared to answer it. If I could please ask you kindly, if you have more than one question, may you just hold the second question until I've answered around the floor. If there's space and time at the end of the session, then I will promise to come back to you if you keep reminding me. And please avoid from entering into a sort of a dialogue with any of the answers. We'll come back to some of those more challenging issues, I'm sure, during the workout session. So, who would like to be the first victim?
Hello. Points that popped up, so we'll just stick to one for now.
Thank you.
It sounds like you've developed a new strain of mycelium to do the job that you want it to do. My main concern is how do you stop it sneaking out into the environment?
That's very clearly going to go to you.
I think the only way that mycelium strains from our lab can sneak out into the environment is if we are almost creating a mushroom farm and allowing the mycelium to get to the stage where it fruits the mushroom and disperses its spores. That's how mycelium usually travels in nature. When we create our materials, we don't let our mycelium fruit, and the sporulation of our mycelium, the way it creates spores, is not on the surface, it's through the fruiting body, which is the mushroom. So there's almost zero risk of the spores being able to escape our lab. All of that work is actually taking place in our London facility, because that's where we do all the hardcore R&D, research and development, and all of the development work on our strains, and how we improve and optimize and prototype our work. In the actual manufacturing facilities, like the one that will be in Watchet, that entire process is not going to be taking place in the facility. The facility will simply receive grain spawn or spores from our London facility, which the biologists in the Watchet facility will expand and then when I say expand, it's literally just expanding the spawn so you can put it into lots of different molds. And then that process is the only sort of scientific process that will take place on site. All of the R&D work on the strains that we're developing and improving and optimizing, all of that is taking place in our London facility. And just as a fact to share, the UK is currently, when you look at the number of spores that are in any environment, for an environment to be diverse and healthy, it needs around 50,000 count of spores per square meter. When you look per cubic meter, sorry. When you look at the spore count in the UK, we're actually 15,000 under. So if it was ever a possibility that our strain can escape into the wild, it will revert right back to the easiest source of carbon and will do a lot of good for the environment. But that is something that we've taken every possible step and procedure to make sure that doesn't happen. I don't know, Sam, if you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, like, lab security is something that we take very seriously, more because we want to protect our fungi from anything else rather than the other way around. And a lot of the strains that we're working with, and particularly the strains that we'll be bringing here, are local ones that can bind on the backyard. So it's not really much of a concern. It's something we do take seriously because we don't want them, all over the place, because then pick up things that we don't want in our products. But
and it's just protocol. It's just we've all been trained in, or all of the biologists I know have been trained in, very established R&D facilities, and they brought all of those procedures and protocols to our lab. So it's just something that we, even if it was a positive impact that it will have in the environment, we just wouldn't do it anyway, simply because the entire manufacturing process is closed loop. There's nothing leaving or coming into the facility that we're not using in a circulated way. So there's no outputs at all that are, whether negative or positive, no outputs at all from the facility, apart from the material that we produce.
Thank you. So,
hi, my name is Christopher Morton. I'm born in Somerset. Run a renewable energy business in Somerset for 40 years. I'm really interested in the properties of your installation at cold temperatures. We make tanks to ship renewable energy around, usually liquid hydrogen made from the electrolysis of rainwater, and we're talking temperatures around about -200 centigrade. Our tanks are made of all natural materials, bamboo, and the insulation on the outside is aerogel, which is not very much environmentally friendly, through the source.
Absolutely. So when you compare aerogel from mycelium insulation, it's a like-for-like replacement. It's rigid insulation that can be formed and molded to whatever product. In terms of the insulation properties, we're actually just a tiny bit better than aerogel in terms of the conductivity values that we've achieved. So you'll get more insulation. In terms of the -200 degrees, you can actually grow mycelium in the Arctic. We've been actually approached by a company that wants to grow research bases in the Arctic and wants to insulate it all using our mycelium. So we looked into it very briefly and found that you very much can grow it in a vacuum on the moon, in the Arctic. Almost said to that. So yeah, that's absolutely an application.
That's what I said. Thank you.
Question for Bio. Why Watchet? I mean, we all obviously love the place, but let's face it, the transport links with the rest of the world are quite abysmal around the business, really. So.
Yeah, I think when you're thinking of where in the UK to set up a manufacturing facility, Watchet is probably not the first place that comes to mind. But what does come to mind, especially for us, is we're looking for places around the world that need regeneration, that need support, that have suffered hardship, or that have gone through difficult times and need a bit of a break. And that's sort of the approach that we took. We never thought that we'd be able to actually embed such deeply ingrained social impact right at the beginning of our process. We thought we wouldn't be able to afford it. But with meeting the Onion Collective, and it was honestly just very serendipitous that we met at that time, we were looking for ways to embed that social impact and wanted to, start our facilities in partnerships with companies, but we weren't quite sure that that would be protected enough over our IP. At the same time, the Onion Collective approached us saying that they're looking for a new industry and bio-based materials is something they're looking at. So it's just complete alignment, perfect timing, and for us, if we are able to make this model work in somewhere like Watchet, it means that we're able to replicate that anywhere in the world. Because I think when you look at all the things that we have chosen to embed in the project, we've tried to make it a lot more challenging than it is, because we wanted to really do community business the right way. So yeah, the main reason why Watchet, first of all, it's the perfect place in terms of trying to regenerate and show that social impact can come from industry. And secondly, we've been blown away by the community and the community panel, which just confirmed that this has been the right place. Well, of course, thank you for reminding me. Well, besides that we're actually setting up on having a lot of heritage, trailblazing in terms of the recycling industry and reusing paper, and the fact that we'll actually potentially be using paper as one of the substrates we take in, we're not only continuing that sort of romantic story, but we're able to continue that heritage that started here in Watchet. So I think there's just so many things that came together at the same time. It just seemed like a no-brainer to us. Thank you.
Sorry, Bill, I'll come to you, Bill.
Can I just ask, when this process with our organic waste material, is that going to be transported through the road system initially? And is there any future vision for maybe making the harbour a working harbour?
That'll be a dream.
Yeah. So to begin with, it's going to come by road. So there's all sorts of hopes and dreams around that. So to begin with, it will come by road. As soon as possible, it will come by electric vehicles. We dream of it coming by train, by ship.
Absolutely.
But those things are a lot further down the road, I think. So
Thank you.
We'll see on that one.
Bill.
Thank you. My question is there any pre-planned bias in favour of recruiting and employing local people, or is it already like we put it out in the industry and we'll have folk coming in from across the country?
Yeah, so the absolute intent is to recruit local people. So they might not be Watchet, but West Somerset, So we want to recruit people here. We don't want to create jobs for people from all around the world to come. Maybe when we get up to the 175 point, we'll be doing that. But our intent is to recruit people here. And I think a lot of what we talked about as well is around the training. So it might be that some of the skills are here already in the community, but if we can start with apprenticeships and help to train some of our young people up into those jobs, maybe there are biologists in the future as well. So the intent is all around local jobs.
We've actually introducing the idea into local schools already, actually, to get the kids already thinking about this as
I think more about the jobs that you show. And about actually employing the whole range of those jobs preferentially from local.
Preferentially.
Correct.
If we can hire everyone locally, preferably from Watchet, then that would be absolutely amazing for us. We're all about localisation, so having a global movement, but working very locally with local people and resources.
Thank you.
You've mentioned again the 175 jobs, but on the screen when you showed us, I think it came to about 72. So where's the other 100?
So it's part of the scaling up. So at the moment we're just in this first couple of months at this really small scale. Then we'll build into the facility there.
Well, that was the final one was when it was 20.
So
21.
we hope that point to by kind of 2022, 23, we hope to have that the site there has been developed and we've got our kind of custom built facility, which we hope to grow and grow from. But I think that we also hope that some of those jobs will be secondary jobs. So it might be, as we've been talking with the panel, how do those jobs set off new different businesses that come as part of that, and that's part of how we kind of invest in the community as well. So can we support entrepreneurs that want to make a different product from mycelium, that want to make lampshades, or all sorts of other things that might kind of spur out of it. So our intent is to grow to that point where we replace as many of those jobs as we can. But in reality, it'll probably take 5 to 10 years before we get to that level.
I think our aspiration is to get to that figure within the next 5 years.
So it's not the project per se isn't 175. It's what continues on, which brings 175 jobs.
We don't know that part yet. I think we hope this is exactly. That was our aspiration, and that's what we're still working towards. But it's a really high figure of jobs.
And so we'll find as many ways as possible of hitting that figure, and this is the industry that we chose that we thought was most likely to be able to deliver that level of employment.
Thank you. So,
what is the flammability of the product?
It's self-extinguishing, so we're doing current fire tests against standards, and the first stage has been very promising, so we're still awaiting the results. All of the tests we've done in-house, and we were featured on the BBC documentary where Zoe Lofton set fire to our mycelium and put ice cream on the other side, and basically nothing happened to it. So we were pretty confident that, you know, on the fire properties that we're going to really do well, but we cannot show any proof until the next couple of months once we've done the testing. But you can see the videos online, it's on our website.
You've told us what happens to the carbon dioxide you produce when you're breaking down the plastics. Do you have an outlet for the other chemicals?
There are no other chemicals. So there are absolutely no outputs in terms of the our process and the manufacturing process that we created. So there's no any chemical emissions or other type of methane or anything like that.
Were you referring to the plastics?
Yes.
Yeah, so the plastics, the only two outputs are hydrocarbons, which are stored in the material, and carbon dioxide, which is released to the air. There aren't any other emissions that are taken into account or that actually exist in the process.
Hand up over there.
Yeah. As the project grows, we talk about staffing up to 175 people, potentially maybe more. What's the plan in terms of expansion in terms of actually where it's sited?
Yeah, so the Pakenham site is massive, which is great. So I think lots of people who watch will be happy if we fill the whole of that site maybe with this facility and not the houses. But yeah, it's a really big site there, so I think that there absolutely is capacity within that site. I can't remember the amount of space they're proposing for industrial units. We'd really like to take the whole of that industrial unit proposed area if we've got to that point by that stage. So I think we're not concerned that there won't be enough space in Watchet. If we didn't have that amazing paper mill site as the kind of
But that
starting
amazing paper mill site is also housing, isn't it?
Yeah, so our part of the facility will be right at the back of there. So there's, I think it's about I can't remember the square metres, but quite a large square metres given over to industrial. And I think that's why it's great for us that we're doing this project now before that site develops. So there'll still be scope by the time they get to their kind of full planning for us to say, actually, well, we've scaled up at this level already, so can we have this much of that space? And can we rework it? And actually, the Mumol lease is with Tamir, who own the site now, so we're kind of working in partnership with them.
And we can also use vertical space, can't we?
Absolutely, yeah. We're using a tiny portion of the space actually available to us at the moment, and after we've scaled up till the end of the year in accordance to our plan, we'll still have a lot more space to scale into. So,
thanks, guys. Liz.
Initially,
sorry, I've got Liz down here, then I'll come to you.
Yes, this product is made from organic materials. We have a lot of animals living in Watchet as well as human beings. How edible is it to them?
So the part of the process of getting a product into the market or into the commercial environment is by going through the accreditation and testing against standards. And we would not be able to put a product in a house that is edible by mice or vermin or anything else. That would be part of the testing
squirrels
process.
eat electric cabling.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's part of the testing process. The only information that we are 100% sure of is that it somehow repels mice or vermin, because we've just seen it happen as we've worked with the material. But part of the testing process is test it against all types of wasps, vermin, and everything, and just make sure that it meets the standards. So that's something we're working on at the moment. We've had no concerns. We've installed it in a few buildings already, and there's been no concerns at all regarding that. But we'll have hard evidence in the next couple of months.
so initially, how are you going to manage it? So you're going to, you're based in West London. Are you going to move some of your laboratories down here? Move some of your staff down here?
Sorry. How are we going to move some of your staff down here? You're based in West London. Right. So Biohm is based in West London at the moment. The idea is that we're going to have a mobilising team that sets up these facilities. So part of the members in the team at the moment will be dedicated to working on that during that time period to help it set up. And once it's up and going, the staff that are employed should be able to run it themselves, as well as input from the Onion Collective along the way. We've done it in a way where we've got a steering group, a steering committee, which shared members from Biohm and the Onion Collective, and they are basically managing the operations of the setup of the facility, as well as the facility itself during the starting phase. We've done that very carefully because we know eventually we're going to be setting 2 or 3 facilities at the same time, and we had to come up with a solution for that very quickly.
Probably should, if anyone's got a burning question.
Any burning questions? Any last question? So.
Hi, I'm Matthew. As I understand it, the process of with the mycelium releases carbon dioxide, and you're initially going to pump it around greenhouses to capture the carbon dioxide in growing vegetables or whatever you grow there. As you scale up, you need to presumably get rid of that carbon dioxide.
Different
on a larger scale.
Absolutely. So the approach we're using at the moment works really well for the scale that we're at, and we're going to we're looking at growing things like bamboo, things that sequester huge amounts of carbon. Bamboo sequesters 3 times the carbon that a tree does during its growth. As we continue to scale up, we're going to be looking at algae-based systems, which consume huge amounts more carbon and can be stacked and grown quite easily. So that's the sort of thinking process at the moment.
Thank you ever so much. That I think was really informative. I now got Sally to explain the next stage of the process this evening. Thank you for being so kind to me.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, so now we're hoping to get a bit of your input. So we hope that lots of you will stay for this bit. So we've got 5 tables set out, and each of these tables is a discussion point. We had hoped to have half an hour for this, but I think we're going to need to make it 20 minutes. And the school's supposed to be closing at 8, but I'm sure we can persuade them 10 minutes will be okay. So we've got 5 different topics, and I think they've been written on each one. So we've got on each table, there hopefully will be an Onion, 1 or 2 members of the community panel, and someone from Biohm. There'll be 1 table without someone from Biohm because there aren't enough of them. So this one here, we've got education. Mark, what's this one? Sorry? Oh yeah, so if you've got any, if you've heard about other places doing really exciting and innovative things that you think we can learn from, please come and share ideas on this table. What does it say on that one over there? Environmental impact, yes. If anyone wants to talk more about environmental impact, come to this table. If you have ideas, we can improve, ways to improve our environmental impact further. Come over here.